Hello and welcome to the Adrian Bo Podcast, the interview series where we take a deep dive into some of the most influential minds in real estate. Hi folks, we're back with the Adrian Bo Podcast. It's episode 178 and today it's part of the interview series which we've had many excellent guests on, and today is absolutely no different with my good friend and number one agent for Ray White International, Oliver Lavers. Oliver, how are you?
Really well. Thanks, Adrian. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure, mate. It's great for us to catch up on this basis and in this symposium because it's normally, talking real estate
100%.
Or just chatting personally.
Yep.
I had the pleasure recently of buying and selling through you a couple of times in conjunction with yourself and Gavin, and that's always been a great experience.
And for me too, appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose the purpose of these podcasts is to adopt a real altruistic approach in the sense that we'd like to give back to the industry, and that's always been my mantra. My passion, as you know, is coaching, developing agents, mentoring, auctioneering. And that's after a long career in listing and selling of 35 years. And, now I like to sort of give back and see other agents develop. And I must say, you've certainly been a very impressive coaching candidate where when I first met you and we first started working together, you were probably doing, 500 odd GCI and then you just won the award, around 5 million GCI. So there's a lot of people in the industry listening to this thinking, how the hell does that happen within, what was that? It's probably a 3-year period.
Correct.
Yep. So I suppose peeling back the onion layers, what we should do is really sort of start from the beginning. And what I like the listeners to understand and be aware of, even though I'm familiar with your journey, is how it all started and how long you've been in the industry.
Yep.
And I know it was a different marketplace as well that you did start in.
Yep.
And that was the marketplace I was working in at the time. And obviously there's been a lot of evolution since then. So how long in the industry altogether now?
So I've been in the industry for 13 years. I originally started at a company called Min360 Property. And how I actually started again before that was I was from Canberra. And I originally moved to Sydney for acting purposes, and I needed a place to rent. And I was sleeping on someone's lounge room floor, and I said, Ollie, it's been a month now. You should probably go find a place to rent. So someone in my acting class, I said, hey, well, my sister has a free room in Mascot.
Right.
And now that room just happened to be the general manager of a real estate company.
Right.
So I said, okay, well, let's get into real estate. So I started with them, and I was just
So who was that general manager?
Diane Gonzalez.
And she was at Min360.
Min360
at Randwick,
with Randwick, Arthur Purtis.
Purtis boys,
and David Gray, who's they're both great mentors for me today as well.
Yes.
And I remember starting all the way back then, like Adrian Bo was the king, still is the king. But, what was the king of, 𝐿𝐿𝐿, Randwick, that area. Any good property was Adrian. So I was always looked up to you and said, one day, hopefully I can be there. And you were doing some big numbers for the prices of the properties back then. So it's funny how it sort of comes around and the time in real estate, if you do the work, you can come around and you can have your chance too. So I would start off at Min360 in Randwick, and then I moved to David Gray left, who was my mentor there at the time. He helped me with a recruiter and got me to a job at Lang & Simmons in Double Bay. I worked there for 1.5 years under Danny Doff. And then I started getting a little bit of traction. I was more Danny's probably PA rather than an actual prospector. But on the side, I was like, well, I'm not going to get anywhere from if I'm not prospecting because I was listening to all the podcasts, $1 Million Listing. If Adrian Bo's podcast was out then, I was listening to that then. It's a fact is that they said you need to be on the phone. You need to putting your brand everywhere. So I was, putting my head on signboards, sold stickers, and trying to get in videos. And that's when Gavin Rubinstein first saw me, and he called me and said, "Hey mate, let's grab a coffee." And at the time, I was like, "Oh my God, Gavin's calling me." And now I've been working with Gav for just over 10 years.
Interesting. So you haven't had that many roles at that many companies, really. So really from Randwick to Double Bay, and then with Gavin.
Yep.
And was there any property management experience in all of that, or just purely sales?
Purely sales.
Right.
I didn't go very well in school, and if you put an essay in front of me, there's a good chance I won't read it.
Yeah.
But people have always been my business, and even getting through the real estate course, I had to ask my mum for help.
Yeah.
Because it was all online.
Yeah.
So there hasn't really been that many, but it's just the journey of life.
Yes.
It's amazing of if you're good to people, people are good to you, and and again, I'm a very loyal person. If someone's done right by me, then I'll stick to them. So that's like every one of my employers, we're still good friends. We've always left on good notes. And with my relationship with Gav now, I'm part of one of the directors in the company. Where I don't see this breaking for a very long time.
It's quite an unconventional evolution not to be involved in property management. What's your observation been for the younger associates coming through? Have you noticed that if they have done some leasing or some property management or some new business, that they've made a better associate because they've had a bit more exposure to property and people and negotiations? And
I'd probably say if I had my time again, I'd probably do property management.
Yeah.
I say that because I haven't done it. Maybe I don't have the patience for it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it's the fact of dealing with people, open for inspections, negotiating a rental, understanding how a CRM works. I've recently had someone that started within my team that didn't work for so long, and they just didn't have the systematics of what needed to be done.
Yeah.
Couldn't rely on them to show up to an open home on time or get turn on the lamps, because I am pretty particular with the way I run the business. So I think in terms of teaching people the work ethic and the high standards as well, so I'd probably say yes, it could be a good option to start in property management. For me though, if you do have a good trainer and a good teacher, maybe not someone that is really, really busy because they haven't got the right time to teach you the basics, but maybe more of a boutique or not as a busy agent where they do have the time to slow things down and actually teach you how things work along the way. But if you were one day wanting to sort of, excel your career, I'd say learn the basics of property management, learn property, and then get into sales.
Especially these days, Ollie, that there's that many verticals involved in property management. When I first started, you were just a property manager and you did everything. You did leasing, you did new business, you did arrears, you did repairs, where now you've got a property manager, then you've got a new leasing person, then you've got a new business person, and then you've got pods. And so there's a lot of areas that a young associate could develop into, from just starting leasing property and, again, getting intimate with the negotiation process, and even just geography and areas and type of properties, etc. So I always highly recommend that as an associate role. You talked about your team. And I know this because I've worked with you. It's not easy finding good team members, and I never forget. You called me in frustration a few times, saying, "Bowie, mate, what am I doing wrong? Like this person's last 2 weeks, this one's lasted like a month." And so you know what my response always is, which is, usually 70% of the time it's the agent's fault, not the associate's fault. And it's because we either interview incorrectly, meaning that we over-glorify the role, right? Or once they're hired, we're not challenging them enough, not keeping them accountable enough, and not keeping them busy enough, basically, and giving them no direction in terms of an ideal day, an ideal week, KPIs, that type of thing. So, but in some cases, 30%, it just might be the wrong person.
I am on the 30%.
Yeah, of course you are. Of course you are. So now it seems to be you've got stability in your team, which is great. And I always try and assure clients that you'll get there. You're like, and I use you as an example. I use you an example. I say, I tell them that from one person you'll learn what you're not looking for. From another person you'll learn what you are looking for. And eventually you'll end up with the right team that, and your retention rate will be high. But one day there'll be an iteration of that where they want to move on and do other things as well. So as it stands at the moment, just talk us through each of your team members, including you, starting with you, and what your roles are and what your specific swim lanes are, because that's an important part of my coaching. And I know, we've done a few sessions where we've sat down and we've actually created job descriptions and swim lanes for each particular role. So if you can just share with the audience, starting with you, what it actually looks like.
Yeah, so I'd be the head of the ship, and I focus purely on listing and selling properties.
Yes.
I focus on contract holders for when it's getting closer to the negotiation or for the auction. I focus purely on hot sellers. I'm no longer cold calling streets anymore. And when I say cold calling, I was always warm calling because everyone's my friend.
Yes.
But I'm no longer doing those sort of activities as I once was.
Yeah.
And that I've got to say that is taking up a lot of time, which is absolutely fantastic. Now I'm at that level. And then it goes to Tess, who's my EA, who is absolutely fantastic. And I think that's probably the secret weapon in any strong team, is having a strong EA that is actually running the business. But the thing with the EA, they've got to almost have higher standards than you. So I've got very high standards, and that's why I think I've had high turnover in terms of a team. But Tess is on board with me. So the fact is that, we make a joke where once I had an EA that stapled a paper in the middle of the page. And for me, it sort of was like, I can't go into a presentation and then open my folder and go, oh my God, look at that staple.
Yeah.
So at least I know, when I go into a presentation, I don't have to look at it. The address is right, the staple's the right way, the sheets are like the calendar, the budget, the agency, 3 pieces of paper. That's all I need. So I didn't even check the folders before I go in there, because I know going in there it's going to be absolutely perfect. And that takes it, I've had, I'm selling for CEOs of banks and, big companies, and they all go, you better be paying Tess well, because if you're not, we're coming after it. And they honestly, I still have people that are ex-clients of mine, and they check in to make sure she's happy. It's quite funny.
Yeah.
And so that's Tess's role. And so she runs everything from presentation through to settlement. And then I go to my sales team. So these are like my soldiers. So I have Lucas Simpson, who's been with me now a year and a half, 2 years. He's a young guy, he's 21, but he's very good. Very, very good on the phones. Sometimes he does need a little kick in the right direction, because at that age, just sort of can get a little bit distracted. But what I've learned by going through other team members is different ways to teach people and train people and what works for them. So I coach him in a different way now to what I would have done in my younger years. Now, the next person is Claudia. So Claudia has come from another competing agency, and I've had a great relationship with Claudia for a long time. I actually worked at that agency previously, and I could see that she was getting some strong runs on the board, and she was very, very dominant in Vaucluse. And I said, well, if I could have that asset on my team, I could only be stronger. And I was like, well, how can I get even bigger? And I thought, well, if I can have someone that is almost alleviating some of the stress from the vendors or the pressure on me, and I can put that on my team, because Lucas was probably a little bit too young, looking at 21 when I'm selling, $10 to $15 million houses. The people that sort of don't feel confident with him standing at the front door. However, when you have a woman like Claudia standing there who knows Vaucluse like the back of her hand, well, I'm like, well, fantastic. She can help me with these vendors, and they feel comfortable with her showing the property. Now I haven't got to go to every inspection. And she updates them, talks to them. She knows who bought what. She knows the land size. Product knowledge is absolutely fantastic. And then I've got Tam. So Tam is actually a hospitality background. How I met Tam is I actually went to Mimi's in 𝐭𝐡𝐿𝐵, which is a fine dining restaurant. And
very familiar with it,
yes,
especially the caviar bumps.
Of course, with a shot of vodka afterwards. I agree. So I met Tam, and the service from him was absolutely perfect, right? So I went there with that when he wasn't there, and I could say he still had a great time because it's Mimi's. But when he looked after me, it was amazing. And I said to him, would you ever consider a career in real estate? Next thing you know, he calls me. Finds my number online, and I love that approach. Were you serious about that? Well, I'm not. I'm serious if you're serious. So come in and have a look if you actually like what the game is. And I think with him, he wanted to turn his life around. He's not from this wealthy background. He could see that he's probably limited in the hospitality business where he was currently. and he sees someone like me, a boy from Canberra, writing the numbers I am at now. He goes, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And I love that approach. And it's true. So even though it's, English is his second language and it is probably a little bit tougher for him, the fact is that his drive, he's so respectful. He pushes, like he's in the office at 7:50 every day. He's out at 7 o'clock. Why? It's because he's got this why to succeed. So even though the scoreboard isn't happening for him right now, I can tell with the work he is putting in, it is going to happen with time. So anyone that comes through a property and he's standing at the front door, they go, geez, I like Tam. Yeah. He's so respectful. But also the fact is that the vendors love him too, because he's 30 years old, looks great, could be a model, and he'll clean the gutters for you. He'll do anything for that vendor, and that's why I got him on board as well. So now I do have a functioning team, and everyone wants it in a different way. So I think the problem with my last hires were that real estate, and especially with TRG, it looks very glitz and glammy. Is that a glitz from the outside? And they see the suits, they see the cars, but they probably don't see how hard I am on myself and how hard I am on my team. So I want everyone to succeed just as much as I want to succeed. And I think I finally found that. So even with Tess, like, she earns a certain commission of sales. So she wants everything to sell too. So she's delivering that same standard. So I think that the truth is now, everyone wants to win and no one's using this as like a part-time job. Yes.
Obviously, I'm familiar with what Lucas does because he's obviously helping you at Opens because he was obviously, involved in the sale of our property.
Yep.
And he does a lot of lead generation work, buyer work, etc. What's Tam doing now that he's the newest member of the team? What are the main focused activities?
So they're doing similar roles. So Lucas is probably more of a prospector, and again, they get paid with what they bring in, right, or with the opportunities they create. And I like to be very generous on that because that means it feeds the hunger. So Tam is similar. However, he focuses probably more on the development side of things,
right?
Because he's much better dealing with developers. It's also I use him as a buyer manager. Right. So any property we sell, he'll call through the inquiry, everyone that's emailed, everyone that's actually come through the open for inspection. We have spreadsheets. Again, it's old school spreadsheets just because I like to see it visually and say, okay, cool. Well, we've got Jennifer Smith, what price range she's looking in, 5 to 8 million, which suburbs, and we actually put it in the category like that. So if I go, cool Tam, I've just got this property, we're doing the off-market approach for 2 weeks before we launch, let's see if we can get it sold. He'll call through, go to the category, call through that list and drive the traffic through the property. Right. And especially in the market we are at the moment, it's very important to have access to these buyers that are actually wanting to buy, or even for the vendors to have actual traffic coming through the home so they know that you're working it.
Yeah. I agree. I think the way that the industry's heading is that these super teams, which yours has become, there should be at least one person purely focused on buyers. So almost anointing them as if they were working at 𝐿&Handler, for example. And servicing buyers with zero expectation of remuneration initially. However, the referrals, the off-market sales, the buyers they're introducing to your listings, potentially to listings to other agents in the office. I really feel that when a team gets more than 3 people, one of them should really be anointed almost like a buyer's agent working at a buyer's agency.
Yeah. On that note, I said this in sales meeting the other day. I said, look, I thank myself for the work I did 9 years ago because for Gavin, I was his buyer manager without even knowing it. But the fact is I was just on the phone all day, every day. And he used to call me the golden goose. And that's why did I get the name the golden goose? Because he used to lay golden eggs. What is a golden egg? It's having the ability to understand a buyer's requirements and actually pin them onto one home. There's a amount of times I could show a buyer one home because I understood exactly what they were looking for. And that's why I'm trying to teach Tam is ask these questions. How big is their family? Do they have 3 kids, 4 kids? Do they want bedrooms on one level? Do they want bedrooms separated? Do they have in-laws that come and stay with them? Ask the deeper questions. And that's why he's starting to get traction. So the work I did 9 years ago, and that's what's starting to come around now. It's like even with the sale of your place, it was for myself keeping in touch with you and developing a relationship, 9 years ago when they had that first transaction. It's the same with the buyers remember it, the amount of work you put into them. So even if they didn't sell with me back then, they know, well, Ollie's a nice guy. He was fun to deal with. Let's call him again because we know he's a hard worker.
Yep.
He called us 100 times for 100 different properties back in 2015. Let's get him back here, and that's what's starting to come back around for me.
And everyone's got different ideas in terms of what the metrics are to initiate an additional team member. Some people think it's when you reach a certain amount of GCI. Some think it's a volume of sales. Some people think it's if you got just too much leakage and therefore I need an extra team. Has it just evolved for you in terms of, you met Tam and you just thought it was a good idea to mention it, or do you have certain metrics in your own mind that triggers the thought process of, okay, I think we need an extra set of hands here?
Look, I'm very lucky. I've had great mentors, and I had Gav pushing me from the get-go. So as soon as I stepped out on my own, or pushed out on my own, I was on a good wicket with Gav.
Yeah.
He said, you've got to put an EA on straight away. And I was like, well, how can I can't hardly afford to pay for myself. And now I'm going to get a salary, and now I've got to pay someone else's salary.
Yeah.
But the truth is, it's the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're doing all the paperwork yourself. You get an agency agreement in, you're finding the comparable sales, you're wasting. And a salesperson is not a great admin. Like I'm not. Like it would take Tess 10 seconds. It would probably take me an hour.
Yeah.
And then I'll get distracted. Then I won't complete it. Then I'll do something else. A phone call comes in. So for me, it would be as soon as you possibly can, as soon as you can actually afford it. I'd say that was a big turning point in my career. But not just anyone. That's someone that is willing to take that workload off you and maybe has the same vision of you of where you want to go.
Yeah.
So whether that's, for me, it'd probably be around 500 GCI. And then in terms of the like a prospector or a sales associate, that'd probably be somewhere between 750 and 800. And then you and your associate are going to be running multiple listings. My turning point was when I had 2 on. It's also, I've got to say, I had a great team of 3, and as soon as I put the 4th person on, it took a little bit longer to get in sync with each other. It was just because then the 2 prospectors versus the EA and myself, it's funny, the chemistry sort of changed a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's when I sort of had a bit more rotation through the team. So 4 was tough for me. But now I've got 5, and that is a great number for me. And the truth is, if like we're running 14 listings on a Saturday, I need that team now. And sometimes, I've got people that request a on-site auction. So I need to be able to have a team that vendors trust in their home when I'm not at the inspection, if I'm in other areas.
Yeah.
So in terms of the initial, I'd say I'm happy with 5 at the moment, but the initial starts would probably be, say 500 and 800 GCI.
Yeah. And you think that first team member, if someone was finding that they're getting bogged down in admin, for example, or there's a bit of leakage in their business, or they're not just finding enough time to prospect and list, you feel that the first team member should be predominantly administration to elevate the agent to list, prospect and sell more?
I remember when I started getting some momentum, it was sitting between 500 and 700 GCI. The first person I put on was a sales associate / EA because I was trying to alleviate the paperwork. Unfortunately, he was more of a salesperson, and I had to do the paperwork because his mind didn't work that way. He was great on the phone, but his mind didn't work in the admin side. He couldn't do any proposals. I'd go to presentations and the agencies were all wrong. They had the wrong fee on it. It ended up costing you, probably quite a bit of money because the wrong fee's on there at the start. It's hard to negotiate. So I would say you're probably better to try and get someone that can do both admin and prospecting.
Yeah, so a hybrid role.
Yep. Yeah, because when you haven't got the stock levels, they're probably just going to sit there, not doing nothing.
Yep.
And when I put my first EA on, I was frightened to give her any work. I would go get my own lunch and go get my own coffee because I wasn't used to be delegating those jobs.
Yes.
And the truth is, if you've got someone that understands what your time is worth, and it's very important to understand what your time is worth, they're open to doing anything for you.
Yep.
They're not a slave. Like, Tess doesn't do my dry cleaning or anything like that, but doesn't do my grocery shopping. It's more if they can relieve my time between the hours of 8 and 7. Like she'll do anything for me.
Yeah. I think you might remember I told you back then when you were having trouble with staff was like have a very clear job description and interview based off that job description, almost down to the gender. If you genuinely feel that suits the job description, age, where they live, what areas they're comfortable with, etc. Where the mistake a lot of agents make, and I share this with all my clients, is they'll meet someone and think that they'll be okay at real estate, and then create a job around them, and almost apologise for their shortcomings, and then the agents get stuck doing the job that team member should really do. So you've probably seen that as well. You experienced it. You see it in the office as well. So I think that's really important to be forensically clear about what that role is. And, over the years when I used to interview people, never looked at a resume once. If I was interviewing for a lead generation person, the interview would simply be, right, here's a phone. I want to hear you make prospecting calls, because when you start in 2 weeks' time, that's what you're going to be doing. No use going through signing an employment contract, paying a recruiter and going through all that, and then suddenly you put in front of a phone and
can't make a call.
It's like a medical student going to medical school but doesn't like the sight of blood. So it's like if someone doesn't like making calls, they're not going to make it in real estate.
I think it's also about being organised, right? So like we go into a proposal to list the property, and we're not going in there. We're just going with the flow. We're getting the energy of the person. We're understanding who they are, and then we just roll, right? And I think that was my problem going into the initial interviews, is that I wasn't prepared. I didn't ask questions. I didn't probably even understand the role that I was looking for. It was the fact that I was just walking into a room and hoping for the best, where I've realised now I'm probably not the best interviewer, where I am trying to get the energy of the other person. If that energy suits, I'm trying to put them in the role. But I wasn't asking the right questions. Like I would be saying, look, I expect between, hours of 8 and 7, I expect 30 calls, I expect you to get in the morning and train. But that's me telling. So I wasn't actually asking, why are you here? Why do you want to be in real estate? And try to understand that person on a deeper basis. So I've now learned those interview techniques. And it's funny when Tess came aboard, and you can probably see we've got a great relationship with Tess. Like I came in there and I was complete fluff, blah, blah, blah. The interview was like an hour and a half, but it wasn't me interviewing her. It was her interviewing me, So, and that taught me a lot, right? So, because she didn't want to move around jobs. She wanted to be with someone that had the same outlook in life that she did, and had the same high standards as she did. And that's why we work well together, because she was prepared. So learning from that interview, I'm going to every interview along the way as really prepared, understand the questions that I want, what matters to me in that person. And just, so it's just like you said, understand what you're looking for, and, just don't hope for the best.
Yes. So what I want to do now, Ollie, is get into some nuts and bolts of what agents listening to this can actually implement this afternoon or tomorrow and actually list and sell more real estate. So I never forget a session we did at my Randwick office maybe about 3 years ago.
Great session.
And we sat down, myself, you, Tess, and your previous associates, and you've got new ones now. But your business was working well because you had momentum, energy, referrals. However, frankly, and then, my coaching style is extremely frank.
Of course.
You weren't that organised when it came to having a database.
No.
Or leveraging off your current listings and sales, right? So I never forget saying to you, dude, you sold me my house 5 years ago. Sure, you call me, but I don't receive anything else off you in terms of what else is selling in the area. And then from that, I think the following day onwards, everything that sold in Vaucluse, I was getting a text.
A mentor of mine and someone I looked up to was said, Ollie, you're shit. So,
So that started. Tell me what else from that session or from anyone else, actual implementable, initiatives that you undertook that helped you go from 500 to 5 million, like specific initiatives?
So I think with UAB, what really worked for me was actually stripping it all the way back to basics. Real estate really isn't a hard industry. Of course, when you get at the top end in negotiation and you can have draining people, but the actual basics of real estate, it hasn't changed for years and years and years. Like I remember watching you on the AREC stage years ago, and we're talking about the same thing, right? So it was, the fact is you have a just listed, just sold checklist. Now this is absolute gold. So if something gets listed, whether it's, in fact, we went through different lists. I said, if something was listed by a different agent, we had a just listed checklist about what could we do around that other agent's activity. And whether that was, text the street, call the street, drop a letter, email, call your hot list, put it on social media, just to be the market expert, right? And then we had another one of, if you listed something, there'd be another list. So when we had, just text message, email blast, a newsletter, the video, just listed drop, call your hot list, right? So we had these two different things for just listed, and then it went to just sold. The same thing. So everything we did for just listed is pretty much the same as just sold, but it's another excuse and another touch point, right? So again, text message, call, DL drop. And I think everyone goes to these real estate conferences looking for, some tips, but I think it's the implementation of them that people struggle with. So I'm now religiously on, if something sells in my patch, neighbors know about it. If I sell something in my patch, neighbors know about it. As soon as I find a price out, just say something sold 2 days ago, it has been extremely hard to find the price, but then finally I found the price, I then tell the neighbors. But it's not me. Like I see agents going, I jump on my phone and I go to a certain category on my phone and try blast that category. I'm like, well, you've just wasted 10 minutes sending that out yourself. The fact is, I send it to Tess. I say, this is what I want you to say. In fact, I don't say that. I said, this is the price, text the street. She jumps on to the CRM, texts it, and it's all automated. Because again, my time is very, very precious. And now I realize the value of my time, like financially value of my time. So the more I can get done, of course, the higher the GCI is going to be. So I think what really worked with the training with you is actually stripping back to basics, because again, understanding that real estate isn't it's not complicated, and then the roles of each team member. So if, for example, someone's a second agent on that contract, well, they're fighting over it. But what I've learned, that everyone wants that data, because that data has leads. So they're going to be getting an email out from me saying just sold, but also my team is calling through everyone that's come through and everyone that's inquired, because we want no leakage. So I think that it was about factor. Yes, it's all about brand awareness of what's happening with us and why we're the market experts, but it's also about having no leakage.
Yes. And, people hear me talk about checklists ad nauseum, and all my clients are aware of it. But when you think about it, whether it's an analog checklist, meaning it's just on a bit of paper, or whether it's digital, it makes no difference. And it actually makes no difference how long you've been in the industry. So if you've got a pilot who's been flying for a year or 35 years, what's the first thing they do before they start? Checklist. Why? Because they've literally got people's lives in their hands, and us representing owners literally have their lives in our hands as well. Because as
assets.
Well, it's not just the asset, Ollie. It's usually there's circumstances involved when people are selling, and those circumstances can create anxiety and stress. And whether it's downsizing, upsizing, marital, financial, domestic, whatever it might be. So it's very important for us to be over-sympathetic, over-empathetic, and not get into that habit where a lot of agents, all my clients at the moment are crazy. They're all just so hard to do. I'm like, just watch your internal vernacular, because you're not meeting these people at their best stages of their life, to be honest with you.
Stressful.
Buyers are highly anxious and they've been stuffed around by probably 3 or 4 agents, potentially even gazumped. Sellers have got a certain expectation in mind, but they really need direction and they really want and need their expectations to be managed. So you're not necessarily meeting them at their best. So it's check the minimum we can do by earning tens of thousands of of dollars is to have a process in place in order to get a property sold, not just wing it and then reinvent the wheel at the next listing and reinvent the wheel at the next sale. Like it's just insanity. There was another thing though I noticed after that session was your database became a different machine.
Yep.
Because you went from sort of instinctively calling people to what I call as task orientated prospecting, where we're scheduling, having calls, not relying on AI, but actually relying on a intuitive call where someone's saying, look, I'm not really looking to do anything, but I did see something the other day, and you just know in your gut that's worth a 2-week phone call. Do you know what I mean?
And when Adrian Bo says 2 weeks, you have to halve it.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So what changed with the database and your CRM system?
I think it was about understanding the power of data. And look, I've been listening to your podcast for years. And that's to be honest, it's the gold in these podcasts to listen to. So the power of data. So anyone that lived in my patch, we would get the contact details. Again, make sure that they did want to hear from us or had some sort of interest in property. Of course, because we did try to put everyone in there originally. We go from RP Data or Price Finder or ID for me, and we did have a little bit of backlash. People like, I don't know why you're contacting me. So I'd always say, start with a phone call, make sure they know you're a person, you're a nice person, and they want to hear from you. Then we put them in the database, and now we're routinely in touch with everyone. So I think it's about the power of data, understanding data. There was also, I heard Tom Hector talk on the AREC stage years ago, and he said, well, 1 to 10 contact points is cold. So it's like you're cold calling them. 10 to 15 is a warm call. They're starting to trust you. Now 10 to 15, they're ready to do business with you. So I've started focusing on that. So if someone can get 15 to 20 points of contact with me, that means now they're ready to do business with me.
Interesting. Tell me, one of the most common questions I get asked is, okay, I nurture my database, I call them, but what's a sensible frequency and what reason do I have to actually call them? So I'd love to hear like a mini role play from you, if you don't mind, Ollie. Say someone in your database, last time you spoke to them, they weren't really looking to do anything, but they live in your core market. You've actually met them at an open house because you followed the Adrian Bo system and took on reactive prospecting, which is taking advantage of vendor-paid leads, as I call them, which is people coming through the open or people emailing you and then you having that 5 seconds of courage in identifying whether they actually own or not and then putting them through your proactive database nurturing system. So do a role play for me, given last time you spoke to me might have been 3 months, because that's probably a sensible frequency. And let us know what that sounds like. And given last time you spoke to me, I wasn't really actively looking to do anything. So I'd love to hear what that sounds like.
Okay, perfect. Bring.
Yes, how are you?
Hey, Adrian. Oliver Lavers from TRG. How are you?
Good, thanks, mate.
That's good. I know we haven't spoken for a couple of months, but I just wanted to let you know that we just sold a property around the corner from you on 𝐿𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻 Avenue.
Yes.
We just sold this for $12 million. I thought you'd be interested. Now, that was a 600 square metre block, which was facing east. And I know you said you're not really quite ready yet, but something may be happening in the future. I did have a buyer that came through there that wanted an 800 square metre block, but they really wanted north facing, just like yours. Now, I know, Adrian, you weren't quite ready, but these guys have a much bigger budget. They've got kids that are actually going to schools in the area. They're coming from the north side. Is there a chance for the right price you may do something off market if we could get you like an extended settlement and everything worked in your favour?
Yeah, it's interesting, Ollie, because that price surprises me. That's a great result. And like we all say as owners, I suppose everything's for sale at the right price. I think that might have triggered me to maybe have a talk to my wife about that. And perhaps it might be time to revisit, because it was a few years ago when you had a look at the house.
I haven't seen that. And I think you renovated in the meantime as well. You said you're doing the bathrooms. I would love to take a look. Would you be available? Look, I'm actually doing an open on Thursday afternoon. Could I pop in afterwards?
Why don't I have a chat to my wife, because this has triggered something, a thought process, and then we'll come back to you and let you know. But yeah, I think it's probably time to revisit to have another look through.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop in your letterbox just a brochure of the property that's just sold, so you can see it's a comparison, but not really a comparison because it is 300 square meters smaller than yours.
Yeah.
But in terms of the layout, I know you've got 4 beds upstairs, flat level block, north facing. These guys have a budget probably 15 to 20 million.
Right.
Which means I feel like it could be a good opportunity for you.
Okay.
I did promise to always call you when I had an opportunity in my hands.
Yeah. No, do appreciate it. So we'll definitely come back to you.
Perfect.
So let's pause there for a minute. So I want to just take an X-ray and peel that back for a minute. So straight after that phone call, what I'm very interested to know, what does your workflow look like immediately hanging up that call?
So now if I just waited for him to call me back,
yes,
it wouldn't happen.
Correct.
But
so what's your workflow?
So my workflow, again, it depends on which day of the week it was.
Yes.
And it's probably different now
So
to when...
today's a Wednesday.
Yeah.
So
I'd probably be calling him on Friday.
Good.
Right?
Good.
I wouldn't be leaving it to the next week because then it gets delayed and I want to keep the momentum going with that owner.
Brilliant.
In my younger days, when my job was to book appraisals, it'd probably be that afternoon. That's wrong.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But again, you need to give them time to process, have a think, chat to the wife, and then they are actually expecting you to follow up.
Yes.
I mean, owners like being chased.
Yes.
Right, in a nice way.
Yeah.
You can be a pest, but they want to know that you're hungry for the business and you want to get the deal done.
Excellent. So for the listeners, the workflow after the call is equally as important as the call.
Yep.
So I want everyone to know that. Now, whether that's a diary reminder or whether it's in your CRM or whether it's in your hot list, it doesn't matter, but it's absolutely critical that you instinctively decide, not AI, but you personally instinctively decide based on the tonality and my response on that phone call when you should be calling them. And you should actually have a strategy in mind what to actually say on that call as well. Now, what I loved about that phone call, it's not scripted, it's not dialogued, because as you know, I hate scripts and dialogues.
Of course.
So it's objective based, and you know that this is what I coach, Ollie, which is number one, the objective is the introduction. Number two is Ollie referred to the previous experience where he said, look, I know that, we last time we spoke, you weren't looking to do anything. Number three, went straight into a just sold.
Information.
Yep. Number four, a story. There was a story around that just sold. It just wasn't 4 bedrooms, sold for 12 million. There was actually a story around it. The best agents are the best storytellers, right? Number five, he actually asked if he could actually provide an appraisal. And regardless whether there was a chance or not, you backed yourself and asked yourself.
In front.
Yep. And then the next 2 steps is a brief note in your CRM, and then the last final step is a 2-day follow-up, right?
Yep.
But if the phone call was like, oh, honestly, Ollie, I really appreciate it, mate, but we're just absolutely stoked here. We've got a kid doing the HSC next year, but we're it's very unlikely. We're very, very happy, but we love hearing from you. We love hearing all the sales that are occurring. So please do keep in touch. Well, then it's sensible that might be an 8-week call or something like that. So
you can't force someone to sell.
Correct.
And that's where I think a lot of agents get it wrong. But I've got a buyer, I've got a big buyer that wants your house. Well, if they've got someone doing HSC or they've got a beautiful family home with 3 kids living there, they don't want to leave. Where are they going to go? So I think it's just be enjoyable to be spoken to. Like that's make it an experience every time you call. So
absolutely.
Like I had people call going, "Hey Ollie, how are you?" Like we're actually mates. It's I'm not a real estate agent.
Yes, and that's why one of my most unfavourite terms in real estate is called progressing sellers. I absolutely despise it. I mean, you can certainly call people and add value and listen, take notes and then follow up, but to progress them in the sense that you're bamboozling them and saying off market and you bring someone through and it's not really a buyer, it's just a buyer that you've manufactured and then convince them that they're interested so you can get an agency agreement signed, and then once you do that, try and convert it to an auction. I mean, I'm saying this stuff and there's some people that are like, nah, that doesn't happen, but you and I both know it happens.
Happens a lot.
And it's actually giving the industry a terrible, terrible name. I actually know of a situation, Ollie, that did happen. The owners sold the property, like, because there was no contract, but the agent created a contract through their own solicitor contact.
Yep.
And it all happened within 2 or 3 days, and these owners were totally bamboozled.
Wow.
And then sued the agent and just were like,
Yeah.
it was basically under duress.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So there's a fine line between being proactive, being sort of, healthily aggressive, right? But then there's the opposite, which is just like hustling in a low integrity format.
I agree. And I think people get that wrong on the younger days. It's where you're like, oh, my boss has put so much pressure on me. I've got to get indoors, got to get indoors, got to get indoors. And I walk out of there sometime and when people start like even like Lucas, he goes, oh man, like we could probably get an agency agreement. I'm like, they're not ready.
Yes.
And I remember going with Tam the other day and goes, that's why I like all these. You actually say genuinely what you think. What's the right thing for that person? Like if they've got another 2 kids doing HSC and the house suits them perfectly. Yeah. So even if there's an offer that came in a little bit above the market, well, it doesn't really make sense for them to sell. And I'll actually give them my personal opinion. And that's what has actually helped me. Like I talk people out of business all the time, but I know when they do sell, they're going to come back around for how I made them feel.
Uncontested.
And I wasn't just constantly pushing them to sell.
Yeah. I was the same, Ollie. Like I'd sit with people and they'd say, look, we've got 2 options, Adrian. We either go up or we move. And the first question I'd ask them is, do you love your neighbours? They say, oh, they're like family. Do you love the street? Can't beat it. Do you love your local cafes? Absolutely. I said, well, that's actually worth something. Have you actually looked into what it costs to actually do an extension? And if you did do an extension, would that house your requirements for the next 5 to 7 years? Well, yeah, it would. Okay, let's compare that to the stamp duty costs on a new property, the marketing and the commission selling this property, and let's do the math.
Yep.
And a lot of times, actually dozens of times, I'd walk out of there and we'd collectively made the decision for them to stay. But in 5 years' time, I'd get the business uncontested.
Yep.
Because fully transparent, fully honest, and actually sitting there as giving advice like I would to a family member. You know?
I had that same experience the other day. Went into a property, a neighbouring property sold around the corner. It was completely different. Sold for 17 million. And they go, well, mine's got to be worth the same. In fact, if mine was on the market, it's got to be worth the same. And I said, well, look, I just want to give you the right advice. My opinion is going to be, and I don't focus too much on price, but I said, look, I'd be thinking more. I said, don't buy first. I'd be looking to sell this first, just because I knew they were off.
Yes.
And I didn't want them to commit thinking they could set 17 million for the house. I said, definitely sell first. And see what you can get. So I told them between 13 and 14 million. Another agent told them high teens. Just went along with the flow with it, which is, again, you don't get paid for second place, but my integrity is intact. Yeah. And he actually called me up and he goes, my wife can't believe I'm calling you, because they went with other agent. He goes, my wife can't believe I'm calling you. I got my tail between my legs. We wish we went with you because you told us up front really what the place was worth. And now this other agent has been a horrible experience, and all they're doing is hammering us down in price. And I said, well, where are you up to? And they said, well, we have an offer right now of 13.5 million. And I said, well, what would you sell for? Well, we really wanted 14. I said, well, is $500,000, and it sounds like a lot of money, is that going to change your life right now? And I said, if that buyer disappears, where's the next buyer? And well, we haven't had anyone else. Well, I said, well, right now I'd be holding on to that buyer and I'd be getting them to sign a contract and I'd be selling your house for 13.5 million because you're within the range that I told your property was worth. Next thing, a sold sticker goes up. He sends me a bottle of whiskey and says, thanks for your advice. We're going to tell our friends and family about you.
Absolutely.
And now they've bought in Randwick. Beautiful. All they wanted to move was give their kids a nice level backyard with a pool. They're really happy. But they had to run through that process.
Yes. That's great agency, and that they're great stories, and I've experienced many of those myself. And unfortunately, there are the bad apples in the industry that just that don't have stories like that to tell. Tell me, what advice would you give an agent who's been in the industry for more than 3 or 4 years? They've had momentum, but for whatever reason, they're having a bad run. They're losing listing after listing. Deals are falling over. Their energy's down. They're not getting cut through with prospecting. So they're basically out of momentum. What advice would you give them?
I'd probably say start again. Strip your business back to the start, just like what I did with you.
Yep.
Even though I was writing okay numbers, we started again. We completely changed all our systems.
So with a coach, you mean?
With a coach, yeah, 100%. Because otherwise you're in your own head.
Yeah.
And you can't go into a listing presentation not believing that you're the best person for the job.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they can smell it.
Yeah.
So I would strip it all the way back, and I mean, Adrian, you talk about A-class listing presentations. You know, the fact is that you know 90% of your time is focusing on just getting that listing presentation, and then you have 10% trying to get it. And if that's not 100%, well, then what are you doing that 90% for?
Yeah.
So I'd probably say make sure your listing presentation is A-class, and you know it's so good that they can't not use you. And I wouldn't say I have a listing presentation. It's the fact that I enjoy people.
Yeah.
And if you're so focused on I need this sale, well, then you're going to give the wrong energy. So I'd focus on going in there, being yourself, being comfortable. You know, you talk about. I know you say, well, it's about where the owner feels comfortable in the house. It's not about, you sitting down at the dining table. You can sort of feel where the owner stops. And I think, Adrian, you used to say you used to give your presentation in the kitchen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they can feel the owners are most comfortable in that area.
Yeah.
So I'd strip it back all the way to the start, work out the fundamentals, the basics, the systems, and then focus purely on the listing presentation. And in terms of deals, like sometimes they just need to breathe. Sometimes you're giving the wrong energy. If you're focusing too much on, to the vendor, you need to take this. Is the best offer. Is the best offer. Why is this the best offer? There's resistance for a reason.
Yeah.
Maybe you haven't done the work with them to help them understand that that's the best offer. So again, strip back your sales process. Make sure, like I give my vendors so much information throughout the process that they know when the offer comes along that they're ready for it.
Yes.
But again, it's up to them. I don't provide pressure.
Yeah.
This is a big sale for them. The commission is great, but it's not going to change my life, but it's going to change their life. And that's the way I work. So again, I would take myself out of it, understand what you're doing wrong in the business, and start again.
Great. Most agents I work with that are doing great numbers and are highly productive and highly successful have a morning ritual, and I know you do as well.
Yep.
What is yours, if you could share it with the listeners?
Yeah, I was doing this morning. Well, every morning. So I wake up at 4:40 every day. I'm at the gym at 5. So gym from 5 to 6:30. And then I actually go to 𝐭𝐿𝐴 Beach, put my feet in the sand, feel the energy of the earth. And that's like my little 20 minutes. 20 minutes, again, it's to whether you want to meditate, to just feel like, again, the work-life balance I have isn't great at the moment. I'm working on that, but that's my 20 minutes of my time and where I want to be. The ocean really calms me down. I have a coffee, and then I'm home by, say, 7:20, getting ready for work in the office at 8.
Perfect. And that morning ritual acts as a conduit between sort of rest mode and business mode, because they're almost like different channels.
Yep.
And without that conduit, if you're just sort of running out of the door with a piece of toast in your mouth and coffee spilling everywhere, like that's going to dictate the entire day, right? So what do you think that the morning ritual does for you, both on a spiritual, mental and physical level throughout the day?
It just gets me ready. It's like when you run a marathon. You're warmed up before you start running. So it's the warm up. It gets the endorphins running. It gets me as soon as I come to the office. As soon as I get my first phone call, like I sell with energy, and I'm ready. So I know if I've missed a day, I feel guilty. I get out of bed. I drag myself to the office. You have a coffee. You eat badly. It's also like why I wear a 3-piece. Like yes, it's my brand, but it's also like my armor. So it's the same with the morning routine. Is getting the endorphins running and doing weights. It's your armor for the day, because we get a lot of pushback. We have it's a roller coaster of emotions, and we just need to stay level and constantly pushing through it all. So I think it's extremely important, and I say it's a very competitive business. So I know if I do that, I'm already ahead of my competitors.
Beautiful. We all lose listings, Ollie. You would lose them as well, and you would also walk away from some of those listings thinking that you're actually a very good chance to get it, but you lose it. How do you deal with it?
Keep calling. It's true.
Other potential sellers, you mean?
Yeah, keep calling. I just find other ones. So I think when you focus just like on your younger days, when you focus just on that sale, and we're talking about when your career is not going that well, when you haven't had much momentum, you focus purely on that one sale, and that's when you really like hit the bottom of the barrel. But if you have multiple balls in the air and you're doing more and more activity, and you lose one, well, it doesn't really hurt. You just got to focus on more activity. And what I do is, and it brings me joy, you can see it brings me joy now, is I know when it hits the market, well, I'm calling around it. I'm calling around it before the other agent does. I'm prospecting around that listing, and I'll be treating it like it's my own. And I'll be creating value to everyone that's in the area about that property because I've seen it. I know the insides, I know the layout, I know the quality of the finishes because I've been in it. So I actually see everything as a positive.
So was there a time though earlier in your career where you would drag that lost listing energy into the next two listings?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You lose the belief in yourself.
Yeah.
And that's hard to get back. And that's when you wait for a win. So I remember times where I was that was working with Gav, and I used to rely on Gav getting the listing but when I was doing it myself, I think it was about understanding who you are and what is your point of difference, and try and get your confidence back in a different way. So maybe do stop, maybe have a walk around the block. But the quicker you get out of it, the quicker you can get back into full swing of business mode and momentum mode again, the better. So through the time that now gets shorter and shorter, but I remember it probably took me half a day where Gav used to tell me to go home because I sounded like a whipped horse on the phone, just like, come on, do you want to sell? You want to sell? Because you do go down there.
It's lost listing energy. That's what it is. So my coaching to everyone is, look, there's 14 things that are going to happen in the life of a day of a real estate agent. You approve an ad, you talk to your team, you sign up a property, you get an offer, you lose a listing, you win a listing, you have a vendor meeting, you do a market approach. Like, who told us that those things weren't going to happen? Who told us when we walked into the industry that you're going to have 100% list to sell ratio, or 100% appraisal to list ratio? No one, So it's alarming that people do take it very personally. And in fact, there are some agents, as you know, that actually get aggressive towards the owners when they actually lose listings as well. That is seen as extremely unprofessional, and they'll never deal with that person ever again. So as we start to wrap up, Ollie, what's next? What's Ollie Lavers' business look like, say, over the next 3 to 5 years, sort of medium term?
This is a really good question, Adrian. It's probably something that I haven't quite worked out yet. I've had growth very quickly, and I'm grateful to be here, but I never thought I would be here. So I've always had maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome where I didn't believe in myself. And it's the exciting part now is that I do believe in myself, believe in my ability. I really enjoy people, enjoy the process, and I really enjoy real estate. And the truthful part is that I actually haven't thought about what my next 3 to 5 years looks like. Yes, I really enjoy, training people and having people in my team and excelling them as agents. And, so for example, Lucas at 21, maybe he's going to be here, 24, 25, and I can get him out on his own, help him build his team. Or maybe it's, having having a bigger part within the company or the business. At the moment, I'm probably 100% focused on just listing and selling. I want to make that 5 to 6 or 6 to 7, and potentially do it easier. And build such a strong team behind me that it can be easy. Where I only have to deal with the vendors and buyers, or go into the certain categories of the price range, or recently done conjunctions with heavyweight Michael Pallier, and he's a very interesting person, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I can start climbing the ranks like he did, and that's just through. I mean, he started off in a lower category and he built his way up there as well. So
mechanic from Newcastle.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm excited for the future. I just don't know what it looks like yet. And as someone that sets goals regularly, and I do 12 months planners every year, I haven't actually set one for the next 3 to 5 years.
What's the next 12 months look like then?
Well, I want to do it easier.
Yes.
Because
more efficiencies within your business.
That's what I mean. Yeah. And maybe because, again, my work-life balance isn't great. I work a lot, but I really enjoy it, so it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah. So I like to call it work-life harmony for real estate because, frankly, the work-life balance in real estate is a misnomer. It's a lifestyle, not a job.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you need, like, I've got an amazing partner that supports me with the workload, and she's on board with everything. Yeah. So that's very important to have the home life sort of matching the work life. Yes. So they understands the fruits of the labor as well.
Yeah.
But in terms of the 12 months, like I'm probably very GCI driven and want to just go the next level.
Yeah. So if you could add an extra $1 million GCI and have the business more efficient and maybe slightly more enjoyable amongst the team and with clients, then that would be a great outcome over the next 12 months.
Yep. Good. So it's exciting now being an attraction agent. You always talk about being an attraction agent, and you never think, oh, would it be nice when your phone rang? Yeah. So now when you actually get to that stage, it's an amazing feeling. Yeah. But you still have to put the output. Don't
get complacent. So the attraction agent is good, but those checklists and that prospecting,
have to still do it.
Absolutely. I've seen so many agents, Ollie, reach a certain point, and I call it not having an insurance policy. So they get to a certain point and they've run off momentum and attraction agent their entire career, sometimes for decades, and all of a sudden the phone does stop ringing. Yeah. And it's like, okay, no problem. We can reinvent here. Let's just go back and work on our database. So every past buyer, every past seller, everyone you've met at opens and they're like, oh, well, I don't really have that. I'm like, well, you haven't actually established an insurance policy.
Start.
Yeah. Because that is your insurance policy. Yeah, that's your insurance policy. Yeah. Like if that does happen and the phone can stop ringing, because as you know, every week there's a new up and coming agent who's going to be, nibbling on your heels or whatever, then those past relationships and those past contacts and that person that said 10 years ago, I'm getting carried out in a box, decides to sell, well, that's that insurance that you need to rely on at that time. So I love the fact that you've hit that level, but we must never become complacent. We must always be partly proactive and partly reactive as well.
Yeah, maybe it's about time to come to a session again.
What's that?
Maybe it's about time to come to a session again with you.
Ollie, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you,
mate. You're an outstanding real estate professional and close. I consider you a close friend. So appreciate you joining the Adrian Bo Podcast as part of the interview series. And folks, we'll be back next month with the interview series with another guest, and obviously just our weekly podcast with Jess as well. So thanks, folks, and we'll see you next time. Thanks Ollie.
Thank you.